Good evening. Welcome to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission meeting for Monday, October 24th, 2022. I call the meeting to order, and please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Anna, roll call, please.
Chair Dierkel,
Here.
Vice Chair Zick,
Here.
Commissioner Rojas,
Here.
Commissioner Toller,
Here.
Commissioner Russell,
Here.
Commissioner Vivar,
Present.
Commissioner Arith is absent.
Okay, thank you very much. This brings us to, we have no announcements or presentations on the agenda tonight, so this brings us to public comment. This is the portion of our meeting where the public may address the Planning Commission on items within its jurisdiction but are not on tonight's agenda. So we have podiums on either side. If you'd like to come up, and you'll each have 3 minutes. I'll make sure the podium mics are on. Not required to state your name for the record, but it would be nice if you did.
I made a PowerPoint.
Okay, so who's going first?
She is.
Did you provide that to staff, ma'am, ahead of time? Okay. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I sent all the other.
Okay, stand, if you'll go over to the podium and they'll give you some directions on, just tell them next slide when you're ready to move on to your next slide. Mr. Humphrey, would you like to go ahead while they're setting up?
Good evening, Commission. Jay Humphrey, Costa Mesa resident. First, has there any update on the joint council planning commission meeting that Mr. Dierkel asked for on 2 meetings ago? Is there any update on that yet? Second, we keep getting these things about all the good things that Measure K is going to do for us. One of them is going to be invest in our parks by getting fees. And of course, the only way that works is that if in fact you build more housing. And it also gets more school funds because if you build more housing, quote unquote, you get more tax. But the housing that you're looking to build to make for Measure K is affordable housing, which typically are apartments and typically are younger families who have kids. So if I build a lot of housing with a lot more kids, then I need the funding for the schools because I now have more kids in schools that are already short of money. So you got to keep a thick logic of what's going on here, whether or not the cow is chasing the cart or the horse or whoever's in first, I don't know. So that's true. And if we look at the funding that we're talking about as far as assuring that park fees will be paid, or not park fees, but developer fees, we have Title 13, which no developer can get permits until they in fact pay traffic fees, park fees, development type fees. And so therefore we already have laws in place. And somebody explained to me where it says in Measure K, specifically, where it says that these fees that are already in our statutes must in fact be paid at a specific time even, or that changes the amount and requires more fees for the benefit. So we don't get any more fees, we don't get any more money from that, but everybody keeps saying, oh, if you're going to vote, make sure you vote for K because it'll give you more fees. That's not true. It gets the same fees you'd get with or without Measure K. So for those simple reasons, I would vote against Measure K because it does not accomplish the goal the council has clearly stated is to be able to meet its RINA, and there's not one piece of information in Measure K that specifically requires housing of any kind be produced. So I vote no on Measure K, and hopefully you guys will get your housing element into the state It's already late, so let's hope it comes in fairly quickly. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Wendy Samo. I'm here about Gym 12 again, across the street at 147th Street. Okay, next. Okay, so this is her picking up the wedge, you know, that she's allowed to have there. Next. Pulling the door shut up a little bit. Next. Oh, and wait, go back one, please. I did want to point out the big fan that always blocks the door. Good for fire safety, you know. Okay, next. So that's how far she just, you know, closed it a little bit. That's going to help control the sound, you know. Next. Okay, so this is going to be 8:16 in the morning on a Saturday. I just did the first 2 weeks of October because that's probably all I can fit in. So this is going to be our baseline. See how it's constantly looks like a heartbeat? Next. So now here we go. It's a little calmer, you know. This is going to be still at 8 in the morning on October 1st. Next. Okay, so we get a little more aggressive here with our heartbeats and stuff. Now on the lower right one at 8:26, I want to notice how it's down below the line and a little bit calmer. You'll see more of that later. Next. Okay, so here at 8:27, we go a little force. We're below the 40 line, but we go almost up to the 55 line probably right there. And I did want to point out in the codes, it says because it is bass, it's supposed to be 5 decibels lower than, you know, any other thing. So we got some waves going down out at the bottom at 9. Next. Okay, so this 756, look how nice and flat that is right below the line. And 8 o'clock, look how beautiful that looks. Look, even 8:01, you can't really complain about that much, but look by 8:29, look what we're back to. Next. So this is going to be an airplane at 8:30 a.m. See how it goes up, but it's not jagged. There's no big up-down marks like you've been seeing, right? Okay, so look what they did to us at 8:47 a.m. Look at that big bass drop, and then they just bring it back up, you know. And then, you know, look at 8:54. That's just a madhouse, isn't it? Next. Just look. Next. This is in the morning. Readings from in the morning. Next. See how here's a nice flat one at 6:16, but look at 5:47, look at that. Next, look at that, 5:49, 5:47, look at that, 5:51, next. Yeah, they're just crazy. Next, all of this in the morning, look at that, 5:32 in the morning. Do you want to hear that? Do you guys want to hear that in your neighborhood? Next. Look at that, just boom, 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 see that? See that on 5:34, 5:35, 5:34? Look, because they're 30-second clips, so sometimes you get the same number. Next. Next. Thank you. See, look at this at 8:19. Look at that madness of bass that they're just producing, and they just do it anytime they want. And code enforcement said they can't get these readings. I'm sorry, I can't complete it. I made it too long. I made it a week. Did anybody find that CUP?
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, ma'am, good evening.
Good evening. At last week's City Council meeting, I asked for an update on the city's housing element. I certainly hope we get one tonight. It was very disappointing after a busy day of work, rushing to attend the council meeting, only to go home and discover an article in the Register with this. Costa Mesa submitted its plan for state approval twice, said city spokesman Tony Dodaro. Each time, the state has required additional changes, Dodaro said in an email, adding that a third submittal would be ready soon. I had to find out about this in the newspaper. It didn't even come from the city manager, the mayor, or the city council to the residents. This is very important news. I feel like the wife that's been cheated on, and I'm the last to know. And then it'll be ready soon. It should be ready soon. What happened? We were told by Ms. Lee back in July or early August that the revised housing element would be submitted to the state on a timely basis so the HCD would be able to find the city in compliance for the October 15th deadline. We received the last request for changes from the state in early April. Can someone please explain why nearly 6 months of time wasn't enough for the city and the city's paid consultant to submit an acceptable document to the state? The HCD website shows we're out of compliance. Now we're subject to the so-called builder's remedy. Can we get an explanation? of how that applies to Costa Mesa as of today. What's the next step? I'd say I assume that we're going to make the third submittal, as Mr. Dodaro said, but frankly, I don't know if I can trust anything the city says anymore. What is Plan B if the HCD doesn't like our third submittal? Was this Costa Mesa's Plan B all along for what we'd do if Measure K failed? At a minimum, the city has not been transparent with its residents. If it had been, we would have known what our Plan B was all along. Other cities with voter approval ordinances are putting their housing elements to a vote and have revealed their Plan Bs, certified housing elements, by the way. Measure K is just as deceptive as what we were told about the housing element, update, and its status. I'm voting no on Measure K because I don't feel I can trust the city to make good planning decisions without the voter approval process in place. I urge others to vote no on Measure K until we get more transparency and ethics policy and the healing it'll take for the residents to have confidence in the city again. I look forward to receiving a comprehensive and honest report on the housing element, including the next steps the city intends to take. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, good evening.
Hi, thank you. I brought a few photos, and she's going to bring them up on the screen. There's the first one. Okay, thank you. So I've heard the other cities are revitalizing by putting in housing. So I drove around Anaheim and Irvine and took some pictures. Next. So actually, now that I'm looking at the photos again, I can't tell whether they were in Anaheim or Irvine. So, because they all kind of look the same. Next. This one I know is up by Angel Stadium in the parking lot. Huge project. Next. Here's one in construction in Irvine, just off of Jamboree. Taking a trip up Jamboree is quite an eye-opener to see the thousands of units that have been built in Irvine. Next. That same project. Next. A little more modest one, 4 stories high. Next. On and on. Thank you. So I also drove through Old Town Orange with its quaint traffic circle. People were out shopping and enjoying the park inside that circle. Which do you think I preferred, that or the photos I took? Whether or not a bunch of big apartment complexes can be shoehorned into our corridors in a sensible way remains to be seen. But the most important issue is about transparency and engaging the public in a meaningful way. Some increased density, done the right way, is needed, but shouldn't be viewed as partisan gamemanship. Planning should be nonpartisan for the benefit of the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I concur with what these other speakers have said regarding the issues on K. And you know, when I was a kid, I always wanted a pony. And my mom would always say, I said, this year, am I going to get a pony? I said, promise? And she'd say, no, I won't promise. We'll have to see what happens. Now I understand what a promise means, because our council in K has made all of these empty promises. They want you to believe that K is going to give you housing, but there's nothing in there that states housing. They're going to give you extra parks. They're going to revitalize unicorns in our city. But there's nothing in K of any substance. It's all empty promises. So basically, our city is going to probably not get a pony either off of these promises. And the people that are supporting this K are saying, but our council promised us we're going to get affordable housing. We're going to get all of these goodies, and we're going to revitalize. Well, you know, revitalize is one of those, either you're going to slap a coat of paint on something, or you're going to totally upgrade it and redo it. Well, we don't know, because K says nothing. It's 1,081 empty words. That council had 4 years to put something substantive together. Could have had input from the community. Instead, we have all of these empty promises. They're going to fund schools. Sure, you might get a few extra dollars, but you're going to have a huge influx of children. And you all know that after 3 to 4 years, it's going to cost the city more to maintain these large projects than we're going to collect. I mean, that's just a known fact. So why couldn't we have had something that would have been substantive, would have had something very firm that they could have offered, not this piece of fluff they want us to vote on? So as a group, we've read this, we've talked about it, and nobody has ever given us any answers. Even the people that are pro-K say, but the council promised us. Well, I hope you don't hold your breath for that pony, because I never got the pony either. So to my fellow Costa Mesans, I say, no on K. No on K. This is your future. You have a right to have a say in your own future and your own city. It's our voice, it's our vote, it's our city.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else in chambers wish to speak during public comment? Please come forward. Okay, seeing none. Anna, do we have anyone on the phone or on Zoom? Are we on Zoom tonight? Okay.
Aaron Kelm, you may provide your public comment. Aaron Kelm, you may provide your public comment.
Sure, you unmute yourself if you're on Zoom or.
You should be able to speak. You're unmuted. He lowered his hand.
Okay, anyone else?
No, there's not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll close public comment. This will take us to commissioner comment. I think the chair is going to kind of take the first slot, if you don't mind, commissioners. In response to Ms. McDonald's comments, Ms. Lee, I asked maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago for an update on the housing element. Is that something you can at least give us an update on tonight as to what the situation is and where we're at?
Sure, I'm happy to. Would you like that now or as part of director's report?
Now would be great, thanks.
Okay. So I gave a brief update at a few meetings ago, but I think commissioners have mentioned that they'd like a little more detail as to the specifics of the state letter.
I'm sorry, I wasn't probably at that meeting, so I apologize.
No, perfectly fine. I wanted to just give a brief background as well. Some of this information you probably know already. The housing element is a chapter of the city's comprehensive general plan, and it is required by state law to be updated every 8 years. And the city is required to plan and zone for sufficient housing to meet its regional housing needs allocation or RHNA allocation as part of that process. For the 2021 through 2029 planning period, the city's RHNA allocation is 11,760 housing units, and agencies that are located within the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG region, housing elements were due February of 2022, so earlier this year. Just as in the way of a recap, the city began its housing update process in 2020, and following an extensive outreach process, including community town halls, an online survey, several planning commission and city council study sessions and meetings, city staff and its expert consultant put together a draft of the city's housing plan. That plan was posted online, released for public review, and in 2021, and ultimately the Planning Commission and City Council held study sessions to further discuss that draft. The draft was then submitted to the state HCD for review, and the state returned comments to the city in late 2021. That comment letter is posted online on the city's housing element website. Staff then modified the housing element to respond to the state comments. At that time, the Planning Commission reviewed the document and made its recommendation to the City Council in December, and ultimately the council adopted the housing element in February of 2022. Staff submitted that draft to the state for certification, and the state responded with additional comments in April of this year, and that comment letter is also posted online along with the description of the process that we've gone through so far. There were some questions about sort of in general, what do the state's comments involve? So I just wanted to summarize them here for the commission. Again, the letter itself is online. Essentially, the state's comments asked for additional information across various topics. Some of them, the state requirements for affirmatively furthering fair housing. They asked for some code enforcement information related to housing rehabilitation, topics like that, redevelopment trends, as an example. Regarding ADUs, the state asked the city to lower the number of ADUs that were estimated to be constructed through our 8-year period. They requested the city further clarify some code provisions related to emergency shelters and permanent supportive housing, to further evaluate the city's reasonable accommodation procedures that are in the code and regulations regarding group homes. And lastly, they requested revisions to housing element programs 3B regarding the Fairview Development Center, 3C and D regarding required rezoning efforts, 3G regarding the city's requirement for a citywide vote for certain development projects, and 2L regarding incentives for extremely low income housing. Overall, the state's comments did not change the approach to meeting the city's RHNA allocation. However, the comments do involve modifications to the housing element itself. So with that and responding to that letter, staff have modified the housing element to respond to those most recent comments, and we've discussed those revisions with the state multiple times over the past several months. Staff will be releasing the revised housing element, again, posting it online to the public as we did before, and taking those revisions back to the City Council shortly so that we can, again, submit that document for final state certification. As you may know, there are only 6 or so cities within the 34 cities in Orange County who have a state certified housing element so far, and with our next submittal, staff expect to receive state certification on that draft. So that's my update this evening. Most of that information is already on the city's website, but certainly we'll be taking a look at that to try to provide any other information that we can. And that concludes my report this evening.
Okay, thank you. And so this is on the agenda, but just ask a question, do we anticipate we'll be submitting before the end of the year?
Yes, that's our intention.
Okay. Okay, so then to address Mr. Humphrey's comment relative to the chair's request, I think it may have been at the same meeting or 2 or 3 meetings ago. I think the chair made a request through the city manager's office and to the mayor that we schedule a joint study session to begin examining the construction and development of an inclusionary housing ordinance in the city. And I hadn't heard anything back, so I don't know if that was run up the flagpole or not, but can somebody give me an idea of how that was responded to?
Yes, Chair. I did speak to the city manager about the request. She is looking at obviously a number of agenda items to get to the council before the end of the year. I have not heard a specific date yet, but I will follow up.
Okay. So, Mr. Humphrey and Ms. McDonald, I hope that gives you some fill. And if it doesn't, you can come back to the next meeting of the city council and continue your requests. I have no additional comments tonight, so we'll go to Commissioner Vivar.
Yes, sir. I just want to thank people for participating in today's meeting. Public input is important on everything. So please do kind of keep tabs on planning commission work beyond election season. There's lots of important work to do here. And I just want to thank as well those who are watching us on Zoom and YouTube. Again, thank you for your participation. And that's it for me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rojas. Any comments tonight?
I have none, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Toller.
I have some comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, thank you everybody for your comments tonight. I think we're talking about really important things, and I'm glad people came out and are keeping an eye on things. I'm glad we're talking about the future of our city when it comes to the built environment. Although it's a little bumpy right now, it's at the surface of our conversation and our public discourse, and at the very least, I think that's a good thing. So thank you for all that input. Also, in terms of the speaker who left, but the problem with the gym, I'm glad she is being persistent. Cities don't have to be noisy, right? I don't believe that cities are inherently noisy, and there's inherently an issue between homes near businesses. What's noisy? Cars are very noisy. Planes, trains, construction, loading big box stores can be noisy. Amplified sound is very noisy, and I commend that speaker for being consistent, and I'm confident that our code enforcement can figure out how to deal with that situation. I think has every right to be fighting that. Lastly, I just wanted to share my thoughts on the last meeting. We approved a adult daycare facility, and I think that was a great use. I think it's an admirable use. That's where people take their loved ones that need taken care of, often aging parents, to be cared for and looked after and have a chance to socialize during the day. I think the city is right in allowing that use. I think we were right in approving that use, and I think the business owner has an admirable thing they got going on, an admirable business. I didn't want to bring up my full thoughts in front of the applicant, but I was squirming a little bit during that discussion because the thoughts that were on my mind was, why is there a market for that? It's kind of a weird question. We haven't always had that sort of use, and I think a straightforward answer might be, well, it's necessary. You ask the people that take their parents there, they would probably give you that answer. It's necessary. The follow-up question is, who can afford that? That's a for-profit business. And if you think about that question, you also have to think about who can't afford that. And if you connect all the dots, and I'm trying to connect the dots, and maybe I'm missing something, but I believe that our land use policies of separating uses, of spreading out density, our street design policies at the state and local level of prioritizing vehicle movement over everything else has created a situation where something necessary is out of financial reach of a lot of people. There's more than just regulation, but we've contributed to isolation. I want to say senior isolation, but it's not just seniors. Kids don't drive. A lot of people can't drive. They don't feel comfortable in the environment we've created outdoors in our streets. Social opportunities. Seniors are not able to gather in the plaza and play checkers or bridge or cards like they used to and like they do in a lot of places. Daily needs and exercise their independence. Go to the store and buy some bread or milk. I'm talking seniors or 8-year-olds that should be developing that sort of thing. They're scared of our outdoor environment. And from family, when we say one house per lot for acres and acres and acres of our land, we make it impossible for a lot of families to stick together. Our land use policies are splitting up families and contributing to that social isolation. I'm sorry to get so philosophical with these meetings where we deal with practical things, but I hope that if I keep repeating these things, they'll seep into our conversations, and as we discuss each concrete item. I want to say one line from the, maybe you've heard of the Congress for the New Urbanism. They're a group, they're a movement that's about 30 years old. They're popularizing and realizing traditional town principles, traditional city-making pre-war principles, walkable mixed-use environments for people of all ages and abilities. And I just want to read one of my favorite lines from the charter of the New Urbanism. It says, "We recognize that physical solutions by themselves will not solve social and economic problems, but neither can economic vitality, community stability, and environmental health be sustained without a coherent and supportive physical framework." And that's where we come in. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Toller. Commissioner Russell.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First of all, I too want to thank the people who've come to comment tonight. I think it's good to have discussions of different ideas and that we can come together and agree that we want a city that works for everybody. On that same note, just a reminder, in 2 weeks we have an election. There's a lot of ways to vote, and I suspect that most of the people that take the time to either come to this or watch are probably people that are going to vote. So I'm encouraging you to encourage the people that you know, your kids, your neighbors, that maybe don't want to vote or aren't thinking about voting, to vote. Costa Mesa is running a little bit behind right now in terms of the number of people that have turned in their ballots. You can do it a lot of different ways. You can mail it in, you can drop it off at the local Mesa Water District, the libraries. You can even still just go on election day and fill out your ballot and send it there. Just remember, everybody's vote counts. What you think counts. Show up and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Zick.
Thank you, sir. Let's see. I hadn't planned to comment on anything, but as is often the case, Commissioner Toller brings up some very thought-provoking ideas. I didn't think so much about the topics that you raised tonight when we had the applicant here. But I'm not an expert in this area, and so I really don't understand the relationship between the services they provide, the opportunities that might exist for people at the senior center, what the difference is between that daycare center services and assisted living. I don't know those differences. And I think if we intend to try to address it, we probably want to learn more about those differences. I don't draw a direct connection between those challenges and the challenge of streets and housing and those kinds of things. And I'm not saying they're not connected. I don't immediately jump to that. What I immediately jump to, and you referenced it already, is the aspect of cost. They're for-profit. There's cost involved. The senior center, there's still cost involved for what they do. Assisted living, there's a significant cost involved for people that go there. So I share your interest in this area, but again, I don't know that I draw a direct connection to land use policy. It may be related, and I just wouldn't necessarily know that. The second thing I have a comment on, really it's more of a question, and Ms. Lee, if you could maybe help me with this, and this is in response to your report on the housing element update. So it's pretty clear to me from what you've said and from what I know that the city and city staff are making a good faith effort to try to respond to HCD's concerns with this dialogue and the formal back and forth and the informal conversations that take place. So I would hope that that good faith effort translates into something beneficial to the city, as opposed to what might be a reaction if they had a different sense of our attitude towards trying to get into compliance. But I've seen people refer to this builder's remedy a lot in response to this October 15th or October 18th deadline. And so I guess what I want to know is, does that deadline and the penalties associated with missing it apply to us at this point. Could you speak to that issue?
I can speak to it generally. I had heard some comments on the builder's remedy before, so our city attorney's office is looking into that and its specific applicability. It's something that's been on the books for a very long time, but just based on recent housing element updates and housing element cycles, it's gotten more attention, I think, recently. So our city attorney's office is looking at that law specifically and figuring out applicability. So I can't speak to that specifically, but it's important that the city get a state certified housing element. The state and frankly, our staff reports from the very beginning have said that it's important we get a certified housing element, or the consequences that the state has outlined will apply to us. As to the specific timing, I need to look into that a little bit more.
I guess the area of concern I have is whether our paths are converging in a constructive way, or is there a point at which HCD would say, well, you're past the deadline, you're well past the deadline, we don't see you making enough progress towards getting to a certifiable housing element. And so I guess I'm not just trying to weigh the risk, I'm trying to understand exactly where they are with regard to the deadline and are being out of compliance or close to compliance. So that's the specific area of interest I have. And I guess I understand that maybe you can't answer that specifically. But I don't think I would want to take for granted the fact that we have this cordial working relationship with them, yet we're past a deadline, that at some point they could say, hey, we received a project and we're going to go ahead and approve it.
Yeah, I would say staff has made sure to continue our working relationship with HCD, including these conversations back and forth about specific provisions in their letter, that staff wants to ensure we understand exactly what they're looking for so that our submittal can address it. We've kept that working relationship. I would say, considering the fact that there are the majority of cities in the Southern California region who have not received certification, and the state continues to work with those cities as well as Costa Mesa, I think that there is still that working relationship, and that the intent is for us to get certification. And we've been very clear about that.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Chair, that's the extent of my comments.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Then we'll move on. We have no items on the consent calendar this evening, so we'll move to public hearings and bring up public hearing item number 1. Anna, if you could read that into the record, please.
Public hearing item number 1, planning application 22-35 for a conditional use permit to operate a new convenience store with sale of alcoholic beverages and off-site consumption food items at 1500 Adams Avenue, Suite 104A. Please note, we have not received public comments on this item. This is a call for any ex parte communications.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Commissioner Vivar, any ex parte communications report?
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Rojas?
None.
Commissioner Toller?
No.
Vice Chair Russell?
No.
Vice Chair Russell? Commissioner Russell, Vice Chair Zick? I heard you say no. Okay, Chair has had none either. So, Mr. Raimondo, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeffrey Raimondo, Assistant Planner with the Economic and Development Services Department, and what I have here before you tonight is planning application 22-35, which is for a conditional use permit to operate a new convenience store with sale of alcoholic beverages and off-site consumption food items, proposed at 1500 Adams Avenue, Suite 104A. And the business name is called The Mixing Glass, and as part of the proposal, a Type 21 ABC license will be involved for the off-sale of beer, wine, and distilled spirits, and for a finding of public convenience or necessity pursuant to state alcoholic beverage control regulations. The proposed use is located along Adams Avenue, northwest of the intersection of Adams Avenue and Harbor Boulevard. The subject site is a collective of parcels with shared parking and reciprocal access and contains 4 multi-tenant commercial buildings. The subject property is zoned C1, which is the local business district. As shown on the zoning map to your right, the property is surrounded by commercial properties as well as residential to the rear. And here's an aerial of the existing site accompanied with a couple on-site photos for reference. The proposed use will look to occupy the vacant suite 104A. For a little background, the business currently exists in Costa Mesa, specifically in the SoCo area at 3313 Highland Avenue. The business will still be retained as the applicant's intent is to relocate to the proposed location in which the tenant space was previously a medical office. In terms of parking, the change from a medical use to a retail use would not result in an impact to parking on site due to retail uses having a less intensive parking requirement than the medical use. And ultimately, the proposed use is categorized as a convenience store because it is a retail store with less than 10,000 square feet in area that sells a variety of convenience foods, beverages, and non-food items. The floor plan of the business consists of 115 square foot storage and shipping area, as well as a 770 square foot retail area. The difference between the business current location in SoCo and the proposed location is that the current location operates primarily as a boutique for alcohol and bar accessory items, whereas the new location will also introduce the sale of readily prepared food items with the addition of a kitchen in the top right area of the tenant. The kitchen will be utilized to prepare sandwiches and salads to be prepackaged for sale for off-site consumption. The proposed use will look to continue similar operations as before, as further items to be sold include alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, prepackaged snacks, and glassware and bar accessory items. As noted earlier, the applicant is applying for a Type 21 license. According to ABC, the property is located within a census tract that has an undue concentration of off-sale ABC licenses. Specifically, the ratio of the number of off-sale licenses to population within the census tract exceeds the countywide ratio, where 1 off-sale licenses are allowed and 2 off-sale licenses already exist within the census tract. Therefore, a public convenience or necessity finding is required for the Type 21 license. In accordance to City Council Policy 500-8, the Planning Commission may make a PCN finding for the requested license. Staff supports such a finding because the applicant will relocate their existing business to the proposed location, as the existing business location census tract does not exceed the stated ratio of licenses. In addition, the police department has reviewed the request and has no objections to the proposed use. Furthermore, staff has included conditions of approval related to hours of operation of the business, as well as alcohol sales and service. With that said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find the project categorically exempt from CEQA and to approve planning application 22-35 subject to conditions of approval. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And we also do have the applicant, Gabrielle Dion, in attendance to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Raimondo, thank you so much for your staff report. Commissioner Vivar, do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, sir. Just a few questions. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Raimondo. Was the business previously located in the same census tract?
No, it was a different census tract.
Okay. Did they already have that ABC Type 21 license?
At the previous location, yes, they did.
Okay. Would you mind elaborating on what you mentioned in your presentation about staff's condition for approval regarding the hours of operation for this business?
Yes. So for we do have condition of approval number 4, where the hours of operation of the business shall be limited to Sunday to Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Thursday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah, so these hours of limited operation between Sunday and And Wednesday, those were, or whatever it was, those are staff's, that was staff's recommendation. That wasn't the applicant's proposed schedule. Am I right?
That was part of the the applicant's proposal. So we included that as part of the condition for the hours.
So staff didn't modify the hours at all. Just you're recommending approval for their for the hours of operation as proposed by the applicant.
That is correct.
Okay. No questions. No more questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Rojas, any questions of the applicant?
None, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Tuller?
No questions, thank
All
you.
right, how about Commissioner Russell?
No.
Vice Chair?
None for staff.
Okay, I have none for staff either, so we'll open the public hearing. Ask the applicant to come forward to one of the podiums. Good evening, sir. We'd ask that you give us your name and your association with the applicant, and if you have read the staff report and the conditions of approval, and if you agree with them.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission and staff. My name is Michael Cho. I'm an attorney with Paul Mary Tyler. I represent the applicant, Gabrielle Dion, the owner of the Mixing Glass. We have read the staff report and the conditions of approval. One of the conditions that was actually brought to our attention by Mr. Drapkin earlier today was condition number 36, but I believe that staff is going to be working with us on that because I think they believe in talking to Mr. Raimondo that that number is incorrect. But we are amenable to the conditions as approved. In terms of the hours of operation, those were the hours that were proposed by the applicant. This is a specialty retail store. I think it is not your typical convenience store where you're going in to buy lotto tickets or cigarettes or anything like that. This is a specialty store where you are going to be buying bottles of bourbon or tequila that are from, small family distillers that are hard to find. These are not items that you typically will find in whether it's at your local grocery store, Bevmo, Costco, or anything like that. In addition to it, if you haven't been to the Mixing Glass in SoCo, a good proportion of their retail merchandise is specialty barware. I'm not sure if you're all aware, but crafting cocktails at home has become a very big part of, I think, the community, especially with the younger generation. So having antique mixing glasses, antique barware from, I think it's just a spoon, but according to people who craft cocktails, it's a specialty spoon to mix your cocktail in ice for 30 seconds. And I joke because I know it's very important to my client, and it's very important to a lot of her customers too. So, the addition of the kitchen to add some to-go food items, whether they're sandwiches or salads or cheese and meat boards that would go along with the types of cocktails and mixingware and mixers that they have, it all kind of ties in together. And so, again, we've read the staff report. We are in approval of the conditions of approval in the staff report, and thank the Planning Commission for their consideration and hope that you approve it tonight. If you have any questions of me, I'm available, as well as the applicant, Gabrielle Dion.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. And I think, the applicability of the traffic impact fee is a condition for all applications like this. What the ultimate figure is, you guys work out, so that's fine. Commissioner Vivar, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Just one quick question. Thank you for your presentation to us and for kind of elaborating on a couple of things that maybe we were unclear on. I'm not familiar with specialty alcohol, but it definitely doesn't sound like you'll just be a 7-Eleven type of convenience store. But I am curious, though, why the applicant chose to add food preparation as part of the new application instead of just transferring over the, moving over the business as it was in the previous suite.
I can answer that question. Where they're currently at in SoCo, there wasn't the ability to have any type of food service. It's always been her intention to have some kind of food service that complements the products that she sells. And, with part of the reason of leaving SoCo, as wonderful of a center as it is, this particular location allows her to kind of grow and fulfill her concept as she believes that, she's wanted to do since the beginning.
Okay, great. Well, I don't have any more questions for you at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Rojas, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Toller?
Yeah, real quick. Thank you for that presentation. Was this at OC Mix or was this in a different suite at SoCo?
It's inside the mix.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, Commissioner Russell, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Vice Chair?
Thank you. I'd had only one question, and that was the rationale for the relocation. But you essentially answered that, but it raised a corollary question. Could you address what kind of restriction you had for providing food service at SoCo? Was it a lease restriction? What was the nature of the restriction?
It's a physical restriction because in SoCo, it's basically a glass kiosk space set in the retail area. And so there's no way to put in additional plumbing and health department required, refrigeration, hand washing, things like that. So it really, again, it's a wonderful space, but not able to fulfill what she would like to see.
The facility. Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, I have no questions this evening for you right now, so we'll open the public comment portion of the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening again. I wasn't going to speak on this. I didn't know it was going to be on the agenda, but I am a client currently of the Mixing Glass. It's a great shop. I can understand why they are expanding. I go there a lot to buy gifts because the vintage barware you can't find anywhere else. The bitters, the gum syrup, all the things that go into a high-end craft cocktail, you can find at her shop. And you're not going to find Bud Light there. It's not that kind of place. You're not going to have that kind of clientele going in. The mixing glasses and the bar spoons, yeah, I mean, it's an important part to the experience of making up your favorite cocktail. And they do classes, they have recipes. It's really a great place. I'm glad to see they're expanding and they're going to have food because, it's good to pair up your nice cocktail with the right food. Big improvement for that center at Harbor and Adams, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else in chambers wish to speak to this item? Okay, seeing no one, do we have anyone out in the virtual world?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
So we'll close public comment and bring the item back up to the dais. Any other questions or comments of staff? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Toller. Go ahead and punch your make motion button.
Okay, I move that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA for guidelines section 15301 and approve planning application 2235 subject to the conditions of approval.
Okay, and that motion is seconded by Commissioner Russell. Comments on the motion, Commissioner Toller?
Yeah, first, there's no negatives. There's no, the first thing we're trying to do is prevent nuisance, right? That's the whole point of planning and zoning, I guess, on one level. And there's none of that. Obviously, this is a really cool use, moving into a cool area. I asked about the OC Mix because the OC Mix is located in kind of SoCo, which is, it's a big parking lot and it's by the freeway and stuff. But once you get inside the OC Mix, it's a really cool environment. And I think it's intended as this, but I've always thought of it as kind of an incubator for small businesses. And it's really cool to see something, grow up and move to a location in Costa Mesa, So I think that's kind of a little success story of our little, grew up in Costa Mesa. Now it's maturing out in Costa Mesa too. So I'm excited about this business, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, Commissioner Russell, the second.
Sure. Just that I too am excited to see a business that has started here grow. I was curious about why you decided to move, and it makes perfect sense to have an extension and an expansion, and can't wait to see what happens next. So good. I'll support it.
Okay, Commissioner Rojas, any comments on the motion?
None, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Vivar.
Yes, I think it's also a pretty interesting land use. I'd never heard of specialty barware being sold like this. That's kind of a cool use. And I didn't know the story as well about the I guess, humble beginnings of this business. So I do appreciate the representative for the applicant as well as my colleagues here on as to the history of this business. It's great to see that a business is moving into an empty, vacant, commercial space rather than coming in and pushing somebody else out. So land use. Policy 6.7 is probably one of my favorite commercial development policies. And so I'm glad that, rather than somebody getting pushed out, we're putting in a thriving business into a commercial space that, I'm sure they will do even better in than in the place they're currently at. So I think this is a great use. I'm happy to support this, and so I will be I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair.
I'll be enthusiastically supporting the motion. I wish you good luck with your business, and can't wait till you get set up in your new digs. I'll be one of your early visitors.
So I too will be supporting the motion. My second oldest boy is a mixology crazy dude. He in fact, sent me a picture of a scofflaw the other night. And he makes his own grenadine and does all that neat stuff. So I'm sure he'll be visiting because he has a hard time finding all that specialty stuff that he likes to do. I probably won't be by because there's a lot of calories in those things and I've got to watch my weight. So at any rate, I will go ahead and have the commission go ahead and take vote and punch your vote button. Thank you.
That motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Arith absent.
Okay, and that is final in 7 days unless appealed to the City Council. Good luck, ma'am. Thank you very much. Yep. Okay. Public hearing item number 2. Anna, could you read that into the record?
Public hearing item number 2, A resolution recommending that the City Council give first reading to an ordinance approving Code Amendment CO-2022-XX, amending Chapter 5, Article 1, Section 13-35, accessory dwelling units of Title 13 of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code to clarify existing accessory dwelling unit provisions and to modify standards to conform to recent revisions to state law, Code Amendment CO-2022-01. Please note we have received one public comment on this item that has been provided to the commission and made a part of the record. This is a call for any ex parte communications.
Did you do that in one breath? Okay, very good. Very impressive. Commissioner Vivar, have you had any ex parte communications
Nope,
on this matter?
nothing to
Commissioner
report.
Rojas?
No, sir.
Commissioner Toller?
No.
Commissioner Russell?
No.
Vice Chair?
No, sir.
And I have not. Mr. Yeager? Good evening, sir. The floor is yours.
All right, good evening, Chair and Commission. So I'll be presenting the ADU code amendments. The purpose of this update is to comply with state law and to clarify provisions of the existing ADU standards. So the city has historically allowed ADUs and other similar uses such as granny flats as either permitted or conditionally permitted uses. Currently, the city allows ADUs on all residentially zoned properties, which can be established through new construction or the conversion of existing area. ADUs are subject to specific development standards, including regulating the number of units, floor area, setbacks, and height. In regulating ADUs, the city intends to ensure that ADUs remain as an accessory use to single and multifamily residences and to ensure that ADUs do not adversely impact surrounding residences and the community. The state mandate came into effect on January 1st, 2020, which required cities to authorize ADUs and junior accessory dwelling units in residential and mixed-use zones. In response to the mandates, the Costa Mesa City Council adopted an urgency ordinance at its December 17, 2019 City Council meeting to establish temporary provisions permitting ADUs and JADUs in the city's residential zones. On March 2nd, 2021, the City Council adopted Ordinance 2021-03, sorry, it's wrong on the screen, it should be 03, to establish current regulations pertaining to ADUs. So we're here today because recent state laws were enacted modifying the California Government Code regarding ADUs and JADUs, including AB 2221 and SB 897. In compliance with state law, the city's ADU ordinance will need to be amended to account for the updated state provisions because if a local agency has an existing ADU ordinance that fails to meet the requirements of the government code, then that ordinance shall be considered null and void. In addition, the state has provided documentation to the city indicating that the city's current ADU provisions are inconsistent with state law. And in addition, after several years of implementation, the city has found several processing issues which have occurred that require clarification to improve processing of ADU applications. The proposed code amendments include responses to ensure compliance with state law, including the definition of single-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings, the number and type of ADUs permitted, various development standards, including height and setback, provisions related to balconies and roof decks, design provisions, and additional general processing provisions. So currently, ADUs are determined by the type of buildings built on the lot and are generally divided into two categories: single-family dwelling ADUs and multifamily dwelling ADUs. Single-family dwellings are eligible to construct one junior accessory dwelling unit up to 500 square feet of the existing floor area of the home, and in addition, they are permitted to have one ADU, which could be either a conversion ADU, which does not have a maximum size, an attached ADU, which would be the greater of 50% of the existing floor area or 1,000 square feet, or a detached ADU, which could be up to 1,200 square feet. Multifamily dwelling ADUs can consist of conversion ADUs, and this would allow for a minimum of one for every multifamily dwelling property, and up to 25% of the existing units could be converted from non-livable spaces, such as an attached garage or boiler room. Basically, what this means is if you have a 40-unit multifamily dwelling, you could convert non-livable space into 10 accessory dwelling units. Alternatively, 2 detached ADUs of up to 800 square feet each could be constructed, or the current code allows for a combination of 1 conversion ADU and 1 detached ADU. All of these ADUs have general development standards, including setbacks, including the front setback, which is based on the underlying zone, which is 20 feet across the city, and interior side setbacks of 4 feet, side setbacks abutting a street of 10 feet, and rear setbacks of 4 feet. It should be noted that 2-story or second floor ADUs are subject to a 25-foot front setback and other underlying zone setbacks as established in the residential design or development standards. All ADUs are permitted up to a height of 16 feet, and single-family dwelling property ADUs are permitted up to the underlying zone height of 27 feet and 2 stories. So let's get into the details of the proposed amendments. The government code permits ADUs based on what type of property they're proposed to be constructed on. On the screen in front of you, you can see on the left, there's a typical single-family dwelling neighborhood with 1 dwelling on each property. In the center, there's a large apartment complex with many multifamily dwelling buildings. And on the right, you have a single parcel with 10 detached single-family dwelling units, otherwise known as a common interest development here in Costa Mesa. The one on the right includes common space, including the shared landscaping and driveway, and then individually privately owned single-family dwellings. State has provided guidance that multiple single-family dwellings on a property are considered single-family dwelling property, not multifamily. Therefore, the common interest development shown on the right would now only be eligible for an ADU that is afforded to a single-family dwelling. That's 1 ADU for the entire property. It should be noted that this is not intended to allow 1 ADU per dwelling. It is 1 ADU per parcel. To comply with the state law and clarification, the definitions in the code have been proposed to be modified to account for that guidance and would now consider, for the purposes of determining the types of ADUs allowed, that the property shown on the right is a single-family dwelling property. Another example on the screen is in front of you here. The property on the top features a duplex, so 2 attached units in the top left and 4 single-family dwelling units. The property below that to the south contains 6 detached single-family dwellings. According to the state guidance, the property on the top would be considered a multifamily dwelling property and would be eligible to construct ADUs per the multifamily dwelling standards, and the one on the bottom would be able to construct 1 ADU per the single-family dwelling standards. So now that we've clarified how different properties are classified, we can discuss what type of ADUs are permitted on a lot. Single-family dwelling standards are not changing. A single-family dwelling property is eligible to have 1 junior ADU and 1 ADU of either conversion, attached, or detached. Multifamily dwelling properties would now be eligible to construct an attached ADU with square footage of the greater of 50% of the existing average square footage for all of the units, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is greater, or 1 detached ADU of up to 1,200 square feet. Alternatively, multifamily dwelling ADUs could construct conversion ADUs, so one ADU minimum, up to 25% of the existing units constructed out of non-livable floor area, or two detached ADUs. The state has clarified that multifamily dwelling properties could now combine these to include conversion ADUs up to 25% of the existing units and two detached ADUs on a property. So the proposed amendments show that change. The state laws which were recently enacted provide for a variety of changes with ADUs, including processing clarifications and modifications to the height restrictions. The state laws, allow for a detached ADU up to 18 feet in height if the ADU is within a half mile of a major transit stop or high-quality transit corridor, and would also allow for an additional 2 feet to match the existing roof pitch of the buildings on site. The laws also would allow for an 18-foot detached ADU on a lot with an existing or proposed multi-story multifamily dwelling. Finally, the state laws would also allow for an attached ADU of up to 25 feet or the height of the underlying zone, whichever is lower. In response to the new state laws, maximum height requirements are proposed to be updated. The height restrictions are not proposed to increase for single-family dwelling properties because these ADUs are already permitted up to a height of the underlying zone of 27 feet and therefore comply with state law. Multifamily dwelling properties currently allow for detached ADUs up to 16 feet in height. This is proposed to be modified to increase the maximum height to match the underlying zone of 27 feet for attached or detached ADUs. And this modification will allow for ADUs to be constructed at the legally allowed height afforded to main dwellings on the site. It should be noted that second-story ADUs are subject to setbacks of the underlying zone, so there should be no additional impacts of the surrounding properties than what could otherwise be constructed on the site for main buildings. It should also be noted that conversion ADUs do not have a maximum height because they would be converting space within an existing building. These proposed changes would be consistent or compliant with the state law. So multifamily dwellings, this change would allow for additional ADU opportunities, including attached ADUs and two-story ADUs. This could be adding an attached ADU above a garage or above a one-story multifamily structure. It could also result in a stacked detached ADUs, which would result in less open space being taken up by ADUs. Again, these ADUs would be required to comply with the setbacks of the underlying zone and therefore would have no additional impacts than any other main dwelling that could legally be constructed on the site. As previously mentioned, the current ordinance allows for ADUs to be constructed with a 20-foot front setback, 4-foot side and rear setbacks, and a 10-foot side setback along a street. The state has indicated that the 10-foot required side yard setback along a street is not compliant with state law because the state does not differentiate between internal or street yard setbacks, therefore requiring that the city eliminate the 10-foot street side setback and allow for a 4-foot setback along a street. The setback would remain 10 feet for all main structures, excluding ADUs. So the image on the screen, you can see the two properties at the bottom include two potential ADUs. The one on the right shows an ADU with the old setback of 10 feet, which is consistent with the prevailing setback of the main building. And then the property on the left shows the new proposed setback of 4 feet along the street. Clarification is required for provisions of balconies in the ADU code. The current code includes a section which requires a 20-foot front setback for balconies, and then later on the code indicates that exterior stairs and landings that exceed standard sizes and balconies are prohibited. In order to clean up the code, balconies would be permitted, provided that they are located at the front of the building and have a 20-foot front setback. All other balconies would be prohibited. In the same line, with regards to balconies, the proposal would prohibit new roof decks to be constructed above ADUs with the intent of ensuring privacy for neighboring properties. In addition, the regulations for exterior stairs are clarified to ensure that they are not visible from the front of the property and that they incorporate screening to limit privacy impacts on neighbors. The government code limits local ADU review to objective standards. In order to comply with state law and remove subjectivity, modifications are proposed to the code to remove terms such as substantial articulation or substantial landscaping and improve aesthetics. The proposed code amendment includes provisions for ADUs to match the design of the existing building, which would include wall material, roof form, fenestration patterns, etc. In addition, provisions to garage conversions have been modified to remove the term substantial articulation and to include proposed requirements for landscaping that would cover at least 50% of the converted garage wall or one door or window. The code amendment proposes various other changes on these topics that you see on your screen and are described in detail in the staff report, including the definition of an existing structure, ministerial processing, total conversion of multifamily dwellings, junior accessory dwelling standards, addressing by the city, the requirement of landscaping for ADUs greater than 800 square feet, and other minor grammatical changes throughout. As staff continues to incorporate the ADU ordinance and ADU program, we will continue to develop and post a user-friendly, frequently asked questions document. We'll develop comprehensive development standards table for easy reference, which will be posted online, and we'll continue to coordinate with SCAG for the possibility of standard plan ADUs. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find that the project is exempt from the provisions of CEQA and to recommend that the City Council give first reading to the ordinance approving the code amendment related to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units in the city's municipal code. If the Planning Commission felt inclined, there are a few alternatives here. One, they could recommend that the City Council approve modifications provided that the revisions are consistent with state law. Recommend that the City Council not adopt the changes to the city's ADU provisions or provide staff initial feedback and continue the ordinance review to a date certain for additional discussion. So I'm here to answer any questions or take any feedback.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yeager, very much. Commissioner Vivar, do you have any questions?
Yes, sir.
Give it another tap there. There you go.
Okay, yep. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yeager, for the presentation. I just had a couple questions here. In the beginning of your presentation, you alluded to processing issues that are currently happening with ADU reviews. Would you mind elaborating a bit on that? What you meant by that?
Sure. So the new state laws which were enacted include provisions specifically related to processing, including a 60-day shot clock and other various processing items. Like if a garage was to be converted for ADUs, then the demolition permit would have to be provided with the application for the ADU. These are all standard practices that the city has already adopted, so there aren't any specific code amendments related to the processing itself.
Okay. So for ADUs that are slated to take up, to increase the floor plan of a residential unit, a one-story building, are there any requirements for open space for that lot, or if not for the lot, open space elsewhere in the community or the neighborhood that would be available to the addition of these residents and in these census tracts?
Yes, thank you for the question. So open space is required for all ADUs which exceed 800 square feet. The 800 square feet number is the by right ADU size which the state has established. So if it's less than 800 square feet, the city cannot require the open space provisions of the code. If it's greater than 800 square feet, then we would apply open space requirements as established by the base zoning district.
So would those open space requirements be met in the parcel or outside of it in the community?
Yes, it would be based on the parcel itself. The residential development standards require 40% open space on a lot. So if it's over 800 square feet, then we would apply that open space requirement.
So essentially, even with the addition of an ADU, we could cross the 40% threshold if the ADU was 800 square feet, because it would be a kind of a by right thing that they can add that in, right?
That's correct, if it's 800 square feet or less.
Okay. Final question. So the 4-foot setback, so that would be from where the property line meets the city right of way?
Yes, all setbacks are measured from the ultimate property line.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any more questions at the moment. Thank you so much. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Rojas, do you have any questions of staff?
Actually, I do. I wanted to ask if you could bring up page 6 of the presentation. Again, I wanted to take a look at something. Just a little clarification. Okay, right there on the bottom right-hand corner, it says mix, one conversion and one detached. Is it to be, am I understanding correctly that that is essentially the cumulative effect or the cumulative square footage requirements from the conversion and detached independently, meaning minimum 1 ADU of 25% of existing would apply to the conversion portion or image in this picture, and then the detached of 800 square feet would apply to the mixed standalone unit. Is that correct?
Excellent question. So the detached unit would be subject to the 800 square foot. Conversion ADUs do not have a maximum square footage. The state law allows for the total number of units to be a minimum of 1, and then you can increase the number of units up to 25% of the existing number of units.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought it was, but I just wanted to not assume on it. Okay, that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Toller, questions?
Yes, I'm still thinking about that last answer, but I thank you, Mr. Yeager. That was it's so much easier to understand with pictures, and everything from the state seems to be so convoluted and difficult to understand. But I think you guys have done a good job of explaining this. Can you just to refresh our memory, just go over parking requirements for ADUs, how that works?
So in the adoption of the current ordinance for ADUs, it was determined that the city would not require parking for any ADUs because the state would not allow any local jurisdiction to require parking if it is within a half a mile of public transit. Our initial analysis when the current ordinance was conducted is that the vast majority of the city is within a half a mile. So the city council adopted the ordinance just to include that across the board.
Great. You mentioned for corner lots, for side street setbacks, there was a difference that we had that the state overrode. So it was a 10-foot setback. They said you can't do that. It's got to be 4, just like the interior setback. Are there any other, do we treat alley or side street adjacencies any differently in other ways? Do you know what I mean?
For the purpose of ADUs?
Yeah, ADUs for setbacks, balconies, stairs, any of those things that we're talking about regulating. Do the standards differ if we're talking about a rear setback along an alley or a corner side setback?
So the only differentiating setback is the 10-foot along a street side setback.
And that's going away.
Correct.
Okay. There's a couple of standards in here that talk about the front setback. Balconies can only face the front. External stairways can't be seen from the front. We wouldn't consider the corner side street as a front in that case, would we?
Correct.
So an external stair could be visible from what could be mistaken for a front, but it's really the side of a lot, right?
Correct.
Okay. 9A3, and in the strikeout version, I'm going to give you a page number here, page 33 of something. 9A3, the second floor of any portion of the ADU, if built above a detached garage, does not exceed the footprint of the garage. So these walls always have to be flush. There's no situation in which somebody could, I guess garages are typically 400 square feet, right? That's kind of small for grandma, I would think, if I were building this, and they wanted to get a little more floor area, they would be prohibited from maybe cantilevering out some of the floor area, say over an alley or over the interior yard.
So you could cantilever over it. However, the total square footage could not exceed the garage. So one side would be pushed back and the other would be cantilevered over.
Okay.
And that's consistent with the residential design guidelines for all second-story additions in the city.
Okay.
It's not to exceed 100%. The second floor is not to exceed 100% of the floor area of the first floor.
Okay. Number 10, that's on page 34. Exterior stairways and balconies. Stairs must, what's it say? This is an A. It's kind of hard to find in the strike-through version. A new exterior stairway to a second floor ADU shall be facing the interior of the lot. So again, it couldn't take access off the alley. You couldn't have a stairway that goes straight to the alley and have a little gate there. We would prohibit that. Or to the sidewalk on a corner lot. Because it's kind of hard to picture a stairway facing something. I assume it means it's leading you as you walk down the stairs. You're leading to the interior yard. You couldn't go straight to the sidewalk or straight to the alley from the stairway. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, it looks like it reads that way. I think the intent when we did this was to require that it not be visible from the front of the property.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. So, yeah, the non-visibility from the front of the property. Is that? I guess I could picture a few scenarios. One is if you had a big side yard to fill in with an ADU, you might have something right on the facade of that. Are we also talking about if you look down the driveway and you could see a stairway at the end of the lot, are we precluding visibility in that situation too?
If you were standing at the front property line and you could see it, then
Yeah, if you could see it behind the house, if the ADU is behind the house, if you could just look down the driveway and see it, is that?
So the intent is not to have stairways on the front of a building. So theoretically, they could be on the side and screened with vegetation or whatever it is, and then it would not be visible from the front of the property line.
Okay. So what we're trying to do is, say you have a house up front. In the back, you can look past the house sometimes through a side yard setback or a driveway or something and see that ADU back there. I understand not wanting a stairway to cut across the facade, but if it's back there and cutting across that facade, we're precluding that. We're prohibiting that too.
It
Yeah.
appears to read that way.
Okay. No, just almost last balconies. Let's see. New construction balconies that are not facing the front of the property are prohibited. So again, I guess it depends where this ADU is situated. I guess most of the time we would expect it in the back, but not always. But all balconies on an ADU would have to be oriented towards the front of the property, towards the literal technical front property line. You couldn't have it on the side or on an alley, or say again a corner lot. It couldn't be facing the side street property line.
The intent as drafted is to be on the front of the building.
Okay. The 27-foot rule for 2 stories, is that even a flat top? If that's a flat roof, or is there any nuance there with roof pitches and eaves or anything? Or
So the residential design guidelines allow for flat roofs as long as it does not exceed 21 feet. So in implementation, we would likely be applying the residential design guidelines for flat roofs.
And would those guidelines be enforceable given the the requirement that all standards be objective by the state?
Yes, we think so. The fact that there's a different height standard between a flat roof and not flat roof structure, that's still an objective standard. The fact that it lives in the residential design guidelines as opposed to the code itself, we don't think makes a difference. It's still objective.
Okay. Last question for now. Garage conversion. So I guess we're imagining a garage in the front of a house, and someone converts it to an ADU. And I understand what we're trying to do. 50% of it has to be landscaped, so maybe ivy going up the wall or something. And we're taking a minimalist, we're just doing what we can, a door or a window. This is rhetoric, but I'm wondering if there's something we could do to beef that up a little bit, because I'm picturing a bathroom window with, a shampoo bottle or something. Could somebody get away with that? It obviously wouldn't meet the intent, right? So there's that. And let me think for 1 second here. Okay, that's all for now. I'll have questions later, maybe.
Okay. Commissioner Russell?
Thank you for your presentation and responding to my email. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yeager. You quite the expert on this, and I'm impressed by your presentation and your knowledge. I'm glad you're there. I've got just a few questions. You didn't cover this topic, but just to refresh my memory, we allow a property owner that has an ADU to rent out that ADU. That's a foundational question.
Correct. ADUs are allowed to be rented out, but short-term rentals are prohibited.
Right. Can the property owner rent out the primary structure as well as the ADU? In other words, an absentee landlord?
Yes. The only provision we have for owner occupancy is for junior accessory dwelling units.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be clear on that. So I was curious about some of the information on page 3. Let me turn to page 37. I have a little reference note there. Page 37 is the letter from the state, and that's dated March of this year, so earlier this year in March. And then it indicates in that first paragraph that the city has up to 30 days to respond to the findings, and that date is April 15th. Clearly, we're past April 15th. Could you tell me why that is?
So the city did respond within 30 days. We acknowledged receipt, and we acknowledged that we would be moving forward with a code amendment, and that was sufficient with HCD at that time.
So that's the extent of the obligation for responding is acknowledge, make noise. We got your letter, and now we're going to work on it.
Correct. And in addition, the city incorporated a policy into the proposed housing element, which is also being reviewed by HCD.
Got it. Thank you very much. Okay. So on page 7, you speak to the one of the changes associated with the ministerial processing. And the language that was added to the fact that ministerial approval can be done without public hearing is that we do not need to provide any notice of the decision or the zoning approval. That was added with specific regard to second-story ADUs where there, because of the residential design guidelines, there had been a noticing requirement as part of that. Because there was no noticing requirement for single-story ADUs at all, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then I just want to be clear about the roof deck thing on page 14. It's pretty clear there. There are no roof decks allowed for ADUs, whether they're single-story, two-story, doesn't matter, no roof decks. Balconies we've talked about, roof decks, can't have them, correct?
No new roof decks are permitted.
Well,
There was an existing roof deck, and that portion of the structure was converted into an ADU.
got it, yeah, okay. And then page 16, the second to last paragraph, the strike-through that eliminates requirement that a walkway to the ADU be hardscaped and connected to either the driveway or the public sidewalk. Could you explain why that's removed and what the expectation is with regard to access to the ADU?
The government code regarding ADUs specifically prohibits local jurisdictions from requiring passageway from the right-of-way to an ADU. This was in direct response to the letters received by HCD that it was removed.
So by saying that, you're saying that access to the ADU can be achieved by somebody going into the property's backyard, and that's how they would get access?
The state has indicated that that is possible, yeah.
Okay. And then my last question, and maybe page 6 of your PowerPoint slide, if we could put that back up just as a visual reference. So what I'm trying to understand in my mind is a situation with a multifamily development. And you had, as part of your presentation, mentioned a condition or a situation, so I'll kind of use the same thing. If there's an existing multifamily development of 40 units, and that property owner wants to add ADUs, detached ADUs, this slide says 2 ADUs max. So if it's a 40-unit multifamily development, does that mean they can add 80 ADUs, 2 per unit?
So all of the number of ADUs here are based on parcel, not on the number of existing units, other than the conversion. So in your example, they could construct 2 detached ADUs maximum.
Got it. So if it's a 4-unit development, 40-unit development, same thing, they can only add 2 ADUs.
2 detached ADUs.
2 detached ADUs,
Yes.
okay. Very good, thank you for that.
So, Mr. Yeager, if I can piggyback off that, you had another slide. It's either after this one, it's an aerial of two different, that one, you had above and below picture. There we go. So in the picture above, each one of those units, and they look like are those essentially all single-family detached units? It's just a matter of what kind of map they're on?
So according to the ADU government code, the bottom parcel includes 6 detached single-family dwellings on one shared parcel. The top parcel includes 4 detached single-family dwellings and 1 duplex, which would be multifamily dwelling.
Okay. So in the above image, each one of those units can do a JDU or an accessory dwelling unit?
No.
Okay.
This is based on parcels.
Right.
So, for example, the top property could construct 2 detached ADUs, and then theoretically, they could convert 25% of 6, whatever that is, from non-livable space.
Okay. And then the bottom image,
Could construct 1 ADU, either attached, detached, or conversion. HCD has indicated that junior accessory dwelling units are not permitted on any lot with multiple dwellings. So this would meet the single-family dwelling standards. It would be allowed to have 1 ADU, but no JADU.
okay. Okay. I want to touch on the balcony issue a little bit. Staff's recommendation on the balconies are only on the front of the structure. Is that's our design standard? That's what we're putting in place? Is there a reason we're doing only the front? Is there a reason why an ADU in the back of the house couldn't have a balcony overlooking an alley? Or does it have to be, I guess I'm a little curious about why the balcony is only allowed on the front of the structure.
Sure.
Which doesn't seem to provide a lot of privacy to that person.
So the intent is that the balcony would be overlooking the public sphere. It'd be overlooking the street, it'd be overlooking front yards. It wouldn't impact necessarily backyards of neighbors where it's more of a private open space. In drafting the ordinance, we just included it at the front of the building just for that purpose, and that it would provide the eyes on the street. It might not necessarily provide privacy for the ADU residents, but it would provide more privacy than for the neighboring properties.
Yeah, no, I'm not objecting to that part of it. I'm just wondering why this is the only way you can do it.
And
I think you explained to me why.
it comes down to the privacy impacts of a backyard balcony potentially being more impactful than a front-facing balcony.
Okay.
Chair, if I might,
Yeah.
the assumption is that there's lots around the property to the rear versus to the front. I know that you probably know that, but just wanted to clarify that that's where the privacy impact comes from the adjacent residential neighborhoods.
Sure, no, I understand that.
And their private areas as well.
Okay. Okay. It's the extent of my questions. We'll open public comment portion of the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak to this item, please come forward in chambers. Okay, seeing none, are there anyone in by phone or Zoom?
No, there is not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, then we'll close public comment. Any more questions of staff? And yes, go ahead, Commissioner Vivar. Public hearing is still open.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Drapkin and Mr. Yeager for that. Kind of piggybacking off the privacy issue regarding the balconies, in the same kind of spirit of privacy to backyards, would ADU windows facing backyards also be prohibited?
So under the current proposal, there's no proposed revisions for windows. However, in the current ordinance, windows within 25 feet of a neighboring dwelling on a second-story ADU would be required to have 5-foot sill heights, so a clear-story window in effect, which would reduce people being able to look down into the neighboring property.
And that's 20, would you mind explaining the 25-foot thing? I'm not really catching that. So it's, if it's 20, if they're, yeah.
So the current ordinance
Okay.
states that no windows, second-story ADUs can be constructed if all 5 of the requirements are met. Requirement number 4 is that no windows are installed on the second floor on side elevations if such windows are within 25 feet of a neighboring dwelling and face the neighboring property, unless such windows have a minimum sill height of at least 5 feet. So that means the bottom of the window needs to be at least 5 feet from the floor.
And that's if the window is 25 feet or less from the property line to the next property, right?
From the neighboring dwelling. So if you have a house that is set back 5 feet and the ADU is set back 5 feet, they'd be separated by 10 feet, and that
Okay.
requirement would need to be met.
And if something, so if some second story window that wasn't a clear story window was more than 25 feet away from the next dwelling unit, but they had a clear line of sight into the neighboring backyard, that wouldn't be prohibited.
Correct. And at that point, you get into the difference between objective and subjective regulations.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go back to my question again. I keep stumbling over this, and I'm trying to figure out why we may, if we may be unnecessarily limiting people's ability to do more a junior accessory dwelling unit than an accessory dwelling unit. But it says on new construction, this is under the allowable number of units. This is for single families. This is on page 8, number 2, top of the page. It says new construction, one new construction ADU may be permitted on a lot with a proposed or existing single family dwelling. One new construction junior ADU may be allowed on the lot if the junior ADU is to be in a single family dwelling that meets all applicable legal standards. So this tells me if there's a common interest development condominium map, it's got 6 single family dwellings on it. Each one of those dwellings could not do a junior accessory dwelling unit, could they?
Correct. If there are multiple...
Even though absent a fee simple, a tract map, absent any of that, one guy could do it and the rest of them are screwed if they wanted to do it.
Correct. These sort of...
My word, not yours.
These sort of circumstances would essentially be the first come, first serve.
And what's the rationale for that? Because it's state law that says a lot versus a dwelling unit?
The HCD actually came out with clarifications saying that it is intended to apply to these sorts of parcels. The single family standards are intended to apply to these parcels.
Are those guidelines, or is that within the state law that says only one per lot?
The government code gave HCD the ability to establish rules in the HCD handbook. And ultimately, it comes because the government code is not necessarily clear. So HCD has taken it on themselves to provide clarifications, which have been updated periodically.
Okay, and that handbook prohibits more than one of these units?
The handbook clarifies that if the lot consists of multiple single-family dwellings, then that lot is considered a single-family dwelling parcel and would be subject to the single-family dwelling ADUs, which would be one per parcel.
Okay, that just strikes me as extraordinarily dumb. Because you're essentially, where you could create 4 or 5 or 6 junior accessory dwelling units in each of the structures and create more housing for folks, you can't do it simply because they're a common interest development. If this body recommended to the council that we allow one JDU for each single family dwelling on a common interest, could we do that, or are we breaking the law?
That would be less restrictive than state law, so it would be possible.
And Chair, if I may, this is something I think that we would run by our city attorney's office. This is obviously a nuance of the state HCD's handbook. The city's code, as originally adopted, was not written this way. This proposal is coming out of feedback from the state. So if the commission would like to make their recommendations, we'll run that by the city attorney's office.
It seems like, and the other commissioners can weigh in, it just seems, that everybody's heads are blowing up in town because we have to plan for 12,000 units and we're limiting ourselves in single-family detached dwelling units that could easily accommodate a junior accessory dwelling unit, but each one on a common interest development can't because it's a common interest development. That just seems nonsensical to me. And if we have a way to kind of move around that or be less restrictive, I think we ought to do it. But that's just the chair's opinion.
I would like to clarify there's additional nuances here that if it is just a rental property and there are multiple single-family dwelling property or dwellings on that property, a junior ADU is required to be owner-occupied. So the owner of said property would have to live in that dwelling. Accessory dwelling units themselves can still be converted from internal square footage. However, owner occupancy is not required.
So theoretically, you could put an accessory dwelling unit in one of these single-family dwellings on a common interest development, correct?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay, and would that then have to be owner-occupied, the primary unit, even if it's within, the ADU is within that unit?
Accessory dwelling units are not required to be owner-occupied until 2025.
All right.
That is another state provision.
So, Councilmember Harlan's sitting in the audience, and he's probably heard what I said. He may not agree with it, but maybe they can, I don't know that I want to muck up a motion here with our language, but I would certainly be interested to say, why would we limit ourselves if there's wiggle room and we have the ability to create more units in common interest developments that are single-family detached dwellings? We ought to do it because we have a really big number we have to plan for, which we've done. But, what happens after that? I think we need to afford ourselves every opportunity to utilize these kind of developments and give property owners the opportunity to do it. So that's just my comment. Any, Vice Chair Zick?
Thank you. Just a quick math clarification. So I know ADUs count towards our RENA allocation. Do JADUs count as well?
That's a good question.
The government code indicates that, yes, they do.
Okay. So to the chair's point, then it might be worth pursuing the ability to add more JADUs.
Just to clarify, with regards to JADU, I think it's a little tidbit of information that might be interesting for the commission to know. Of the 190 so ADUs that the city has permitted or in the process of permitting, approximately one JADU is in that mix.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think people are trying to make money, not house people. The question I've got, there's a slide that you had where you showed a couple of multifamily developments, and you had red circles indicating the potential of building a second floor. Yeah, no, that one. The picture on the right, so that parcel, that's a multifamily development there. And from what you said, or what I understood you to say, that parcel would be limited to only 2 ADUs, correct?
So this is a multifamily parcel.
Mm-hmm.
And the parcel would be limited to 2 detached ADUs.
That's what I meant.
And conversion ADUs up to 25% of the existing number of dwellings.
So in terms of the detached ADUs, because you have circled the nice big green space there, 2,400 square feet would be the maximum square footage that they could build in that area?
If a property owner on a multifamily dwelling wanted to construct 2 ADUs, they would be limited to 800 square feet each. So in this, potentially, they could do 1,600 square feet of coverage, or they could stack those and do one 800 square foot ADU on top of another 800 square foot ADU.
Oh, so exceeding the 800, that only applies in single family?
If they wanted to, there's 2 separate standards here. If they wanted to build one new ADU, they could go up to 1,200 square feet.
Got it.
If you want to do 2, they're limited to 800 square feet each.
Got it. That answers that question. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other, yeah, Commissioner Toller and then Commissioner Russell.
I've already went. Does Commissioner Russell want to go?
No, before you close the public hearing, I think we have someone that wants to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't see you.
Sorry.
My apologies. So I closed public comment, but since we don't have people clamoring to speak, we'll open it back up and you have 3 minutes.
I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question. I applied for an ADU. My property is in R1, but there is existing 3 units there. One is a duplex, and one is a single-family home. And we built a garage and a workstation that is less than 10 years old. And we applied for an ADU to convert the garage and the workstation into a 1-bedroom ADU, and that will be under 800 square feet. I thought I got a permission to go ahead, but then it got denied last second. Well, they said it's approved and it's unapproved because I would have to tear down the existing garage and workstation that is less than 10 years old and it's beautiful. And then for me to build a new building identical to comply with the rules.
Understood. So I appreciate your seeking clarification on your application.
Clarification and approval?
Well, no, because 1, that's not our job to approve accessory dwelling units. That's the staff's job. And 2, I think rather because it sounds complex to me, what I would have you do is, Mr. Yeager and the staff is right here. As soon as this meeting wraps up, I would get together with them and they'll probably either give you their number and they'll work with you to kind of clarify your situation or provide you a reason why what happened.
Or if the
Yeah, but I don't think that this particular forum is the right place to do that. With all due respect, I understand.
Thank you.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, if I may, under the current code, buildings with multiple units on it, if it's a multifamily dwelling, conversions are only allowed if it is attached to the multifamily dwelling. Under the proposed code, conversions would be allowed for detached structures, but that would count as a detached ADU, not as a conversion
Understood.
ADU.
Understood. But I think she, because the gears are grinding in my head, and so I think if you can get together with her and kind of walk her through that.
And I'm happy to do that.
That would be great. Thank you. Okay. All right, Commissioner Toller, public hearing's still open.
If you have a one-story house, can you exceed that height for an ADU? Can you do a two-story ADU in the back?
The height restrictions apply to to the height of a building which could legally be constructed on the lot. So yes.
I started thinking about nonconformities, and slide 14 had some older apartments, and I don't know if those are in line with. I'm looking at that one on the right and like where those ADUs can go. Whether they're non-conforming or not, let's see. There was an open space requirement that those complied with at one point. Could an ADU eat into that required open space?
If the ADU is less than 800 square feet, then yes.
Okay, that makes sense. JADU is limited to 500 square feet, so I would imagine, sounds like we've only had one, but that would be the candidate for garage conversions, JADUs.
Just because it's limited to 500 square feet, the fact that it would have to be owner occupied has led to most people who are doing garage conversions to classify it as an accessory dwelling unit and not a JADU.
So that they have the freedom to rent both out and skip town. Okay.
Correct.
But could I theoretically, if I owned a single family home, could I convert my garage to a JADU and build a 800 square foot ADU in the back?
Our current code would not allow for that, which would not be in compliance with state code. The proposed code would allow for that.
Yeah. But because I have a JADU now, I have to stay there.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions of staff? Okay. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, motions. Anybody have a motion, please hit your motion button. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and take a shot at it. So, I'm going to move that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find that the project is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21080.17 and CEQA Guidelines Section 154282. Recommend that the City Council give first reading to an ordinance approving Code Amendment CO-2022-01, amending Title 13 of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. I would add to the motion that the commission recommend to the City Council that they give consideration to allow the provision of a new accessory dwelling unit in a single-family dwelling in a common interest development, and not limit it to one. And I see a second by Commissioner Vivar. You seconding, Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Comments on the motion, Commissioner Vivar, since you're seconding? It's on.
All right. Yeah, I think your second ties back to the discussion that was had earlier regarding helping us, giving ourselves as a city tools to meet the RENA requirements that were imposed on us. So if this is going to help us with that, I am in support of it, and I don't see a problem with it. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Rojas, any comments on the motion?
None, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Toller.
Yes, and I'm in support of the motion. I'd like to add, I know what there's going to be a staff report for the council meeting, and it's going to summarize our thoughts. So if now is an appropriate time, I'd like
Yes,
to
sir.
give
Go
you some
ahead,
bullet
please.
points. of
Yep,
what
absolutely.
Okay.
If you want something looked at, speak up.
I don't have the answers or proposed concrete solutions, but I kind of want to kick this to council to think about. The aesthetic requirements. So if you have a conversion of the front garage, we say one door, one window, or cover half of the wall with vines. I think we need to beef that up a little bit. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I know what wouldn't suffice, right? I think we could all imagine a crummy job of that. So just think about the shower window, right? That's what you might get, and we'd have to check it off, right?
Just as long as glass block doesn't make a return.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just kidding.
I know we have the residential design standards that require walls to be flush, but I think there are, detached garages in a lot of our old neighborhoods, those are 400 square feet. And that's, if you're trying to house a loved one, that's a small little place. And you'd have to weigh the risk the aesthetic risk we're taking against the ability of them to get a little bit more room out of that. So I think there could be situations I could drive around and, we could find examples of that being done well. It can be done well. And I'd like us to explore ways to decorative brackets over the alley only, something like that, where people could have a little bit of flexibility. Stairways is kind of a big one. This is my third point. I think there needs to be some differentiation between whether we're talking about an alley property line or a side street property line on a corner site. I think there needs to be a little nuance. I think some of the most charming buildings in the world have stairs going up to an upper floor, and I don't think we should be discouraging that, especially on aesthetic grounds. So stairs going to an alley, I think we want a lot of entrances. I think that's a principle of a welcoming environment, a lot of eyes on the street, entrances, doors and windows. If we could treat, at least in these situations, a side street kind of like a front, and allow stairways going out there and being visible, I know we could all think of bad examples of that. We could think of, crummy old 60s apartment buildings, what we're trying to avoid, but that can be done well. And I hope that we could think of what we could put in there, objective standards to ensure that it looks nice. Visibility and access, side streets and alleys. Balconies, I think we need a little more nuance there. When we were talking about it can only be over the front. And that picture, I don't know if that's slide 15, and maybe, I guess the idea there is an ADU constructed over a front garage. And so the balcony, of course, if it's on the street, if it's on the front property, against the front property line, a balcony is nice there and it's appropriate there. We're trying to shape and make the public realm more interesting. I think that's good. But if we're talking about a rear ADU and it's facing the front property line, I don't think that's the intent, because then it's overlooking the shared interior yard, right? And also probably looking into the private rooms of the primary dwelling. So I think we need to think those balcony requirements through. Corner lots, again, treat this side street like a front. So let's not be so literal and just say front property line. So does that make sense? Just the idea of balconies. What do we really mean? What are we trying to protect, and what standards would further our goals of maintaining privacy and making our public realm nicer? Also the windows. I think that's a great, clear story window. So you could have windows. Obviously you want daylight, fresh air coming into the unit. We got to balance that with privacy. So we do have that thing where, 25 feet from another building, I think it's something like that. I think we can, let's see, where would normal buildings be appropriate and where do clear story windows need to be required? I don't have the answer, and it's kind of escaped. I was thinking about this like 20 minutes ago, but I think we should think about that, where clear stories should be required and why, and where normal windows should be okay. And in a lot of these things, I'm talking about alley adjacencies and corner adjacencies, and I don't want them to be treated the same as if you have a neighbor right there. And we also need to think about whether it's in someone's backyard or not. And then I am also in support of what Chair DeErico was talking about with the common interest developments being treated the same. And those are all my comments.
Commissioner Russell, comments on the motion?
Well, obviously, I'm going to be supporting the motion. I would like to just really suggest that we look at and making sure that these changes facilitate the development of more ADUs. I know I've had conversations with folks that were trying to get them built, and our regulations just didn't quite fit with what they wanted to do. And so I just encourage the city council to continue to look at what they can do to make this easier, and staff as well, within the requirements of the state. So thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. Start by saying I will be supporting the motion. There's one aspect of the ordinance that I have an interest in, and I don't know if it's something that we can address. I know I've had some discussion with staff about this. I've never been a fan of the 4-foot setback. There's nothing we can do about that, I understand. But within that 4-foot setback, when there's mechanical equipment, I just think that creates two situations that are less than desirable. One is noise impact. Now, if it was a 5-foot setback, they probably would do that. We wouldn't have anything in our municipal code that would prevent it. But I think it makes it even worse when it's only a 4-foot setback and we have mechanical equipment there. Access is another thing that is somewhat restricted, but maybe that's not an issue. But I think if we have the ability to look at that, we should, because I'd prefer not to see mechanical equipment in the 4-foot setback. Beyond that, I think we have to make these changes. HCD is essentially telling you have to make the changes, and you have a little bit of latitude, but for the most part, we don't. So we have to do this. And I don't see any of these changes as being particularly onerous over the decision that has already been made that we have ADUs. Clearly, the underlying intention is to add more housing stock, I think. And so the idea that people are building these for their loved ones, in some respects, I think a lot of people might be doing that. But from a state standpoint, that probably isn't helping with adding housing stock if you've got a family member there. I like the term that Commissioner Toller said about building this for your loved one. And I couldn't help but think you love them, but not enough for them to be in your house. You want them over than that house. So I don't know, that just struck me as sort of humorous. We care more about providing housing than maintaining open space. I think that's unfortunate, particularly when our own community is shy on its recommended park ratio. By definition, not providing parking on site. I just think it just clutters up the streets. It creates the other issues that we run into, where then people want to have their street protected because there's a bunch of overflow parking from adjacent neighborhoods. We get into that issue. We get into the issue where the street cleaner can't come through because there's never a time when the street is not impacted with cars. I just think that's unfortunate. Are we really providing streets for parking lots? Some people think so. I don't. The other thing we talk about, or some people do who are advocates for this, say this addresses affordability. I have an opinion about that that I'll quickly share, because I think it only helps affordability from a myopic standpoint. If you're providing somebody cheap rent because you're providing them a less than desirable dwelling unit, meaning I'd rather have my own studio apartment, but I can't afford that, but I can afford to live in somebody's backyard. That makes it affordable. And if that's your goal, good, you've helped achieve that goal. What you haven't helped, though, is that individual get to a point where they can own property and build wealth. What you have done by allowing ADUs to be built is the person who owns the property has now improved their property, they've increased their property value, which makes that property even less affordable to somebody that was trying to buy a house. And if you think trying to help the affordability issue with regard to purchasing homes is important, this runs counter to that. And so I just think that people should have in mind what is the objective and what are the consequences in pursuit of that objective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. So gladly supporting the motion. Obviously, I made it. I think anything we can do to facilitate the additions to our housing stock is a positive thing. It's interesting what you said about having our loved one in the ADU in your yard, and you love them, but you don't love them so much you have them live in your house. It might be the other way around. Is the old grandpa doesn't want to live with a family in the main house, and they like having their own space. So you can go both ways. So, it's interesting about Costa Mesa. We talk about affordability, and I don't know where there's affordable housing in Southern California. I don't know that it exists. But I do believe in supply and demand over time. I think if you add supply and demand comes and goes, and supply, particularly with housing, tends to be constant. So you'll see fluctuations of affordability and non-affordability. But the interesting thing, and I think homeownership is a laudable goal, and I hope, one of my children owns their own home, and I hope that my other three will have the opportunity to own a home someday. But the interesting history about Costa Mesa, it has been an upside-down city in terms of homeowner to renter ratio for as long as I can remember. It's exactly the opposite of what most cities are. And there's a reason for that, and that is most of the people that own homes in Costa Mesa and rent them out do so because they choose not to live in Costa Mesa. This is such a unique city in terms of the bulk of its housing stock is income property. They were maybe once were lived in by the primary owner, but now it's shifted, and the whole homeownership aspect is shifting all over the place. Corporations are buying up single-family detached houses like cracker boxes and renting them out, and that's because a lack of affordability. If a 1962 tract house in Costa Mesa is now on the order of $1.2 million, if they can get it in the market, great. But I just think that, the more supply we can create, I believe in economics. I think ultimately housing prices will moderate, and maybe more people can afford to live in Costa Mesa, particularly if we, on new development, have an inclusionary housing ordinance. I know that's non-market driven, but I think, in my experience, companies like the Irvine Company and big apartment, they've learned how to work with it. Irvine's had one for almost 20 years. And we know who does most of that home building in Irvine. So I understand the goal of homeownership. That has never been kind of a driving force in Costa Mesa. We've always been kind of an absentee property owner city where And the kind of the middle economy has always come here to rent a house or rent an apartment. I don't know that it's going to change anytime soon. I don't know how you can change it. You can't mandate property, that the owner live in his house. So I think we're kind of doing the best we can. With that, we'll call for the question. Button's working? Oh, yeah, Jimmy, could you second again?
Oh, sure. Did that work? Did that work?
I'm not. Yeah, so, and why don't we do, I know the motion was on the floor by the chair, it was seconded by Commissioner Vivar. Let's do a voice vote.
Chair Dierical,
Aye.
Vice Chair Zick,
Aye.
Commissioner Rojas,
Aye.
Commissioner Russell,
Aye.
Commissioner Toller,
Aye.
Commissioner Vivar.
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Arith absent.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioners. We have no old business tonight nor new business. That moves us to department reports. Public Works report. Mr. Yang.
No Public Works report tonight, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Development Services report, Ms. Lee. And by the way, thank you very much for the update on the housing element. I know I kind of put you on the spot there last minute, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. I just wanted to give some kudos to our city staff, as I think is evidenced by the discussion this evening of accessory dwelling units and all of the regulations that are involved in just that one particular aspect of development. We have a department that is running economic development in the city, overseeing development services, keeping track of state legislation, and attempting, as you've seen tonight, to do a customer service-friendly job of interpreting all of those different laws and communicating that to our community in the best way that we can in an environment where the laws are changing, honestly, very often. So we just updated our customer service numbers. This year, we are on track to serve at our public counter over 13,000 customers just this fiscal year. That is back to and exceeding pre-pandemic levels. Our development review application numbers are just as high as well as our over-the-counter customer services as well. So just wanted to give great kudos to city staff, and we are going to continue to assist our customers and our Costa Mesa residents, and we're very proud to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. City Attorney report, Mr. Preziosi.
No report this evening, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Preziosi, I know you're constantly watching legislation and you're looking at this kind of remedy project issue. And maybe and I don't know how we do this, I think we've circulated internal memos before to the commission. I would love to have an understanding of what the city may be facing, implications relative to AB 2011 and SB 6.
Thank you, Chair Dierical. We will get to work on that. A memo will be circulating shortly that addresses a confidential memorandum that addresses all the housing-related 2022, effective 2023 changes, which will incorporate much of that analysis.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Okay, then we'll stand in adjournment to the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting of November 14th, 2022. Good night.